Why should I be proud of you? You're not even my real daughter." My father, the man who had raised me for 22 years, spat those words in front of 300 graduating students, their families, and every professor in the biology department, his voice echoing off the auditorium walls like a gunshot. But before I could crumble, before I could run, before I could do anything except stand there in my cap and gown with my summa cum laude honors sash feeling like the biggest fool in the world, my professor, Dr. William Ashford, stepped forward from the faculty section, pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, and said 7 words that made my father's face turn the color of ash. "She's not yours.
She's mine.
And I've been looking for her for 22 years. Before I tell you how I discovered that the man who had tormented me my entire life wasn't my father at all, and that the professor who had mentored me for 4 years had been searching for his stolen daughter since the day she was born, take a moment to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. This story might just change how you see family, identity, and the lies that can define and destroy an entire life. My name is Melody Harper. At least, that's the name I grew up with. I'm 22 years old, and until my college graduation day 3 months ago, I believed I knew exactly who I was, the unwanted daughter of Richard Harper, a man who had spent my entire life making sure I understood that my existence was a burden he never asked for. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a small town called Millbrook in upstate New York, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody and secrets are supposed to be impossible to keep. My mother, Diana Harper, died when I was 3 years old, a car accident on an icy January road. I have no real memories of her, just photographs and stories and a vague, aching sense of loss that never quite went away. After my mother died, it was just me and my father. Richard Harper was a mechanic who owned a small auto shop on the edge of town. He was good at his job, everyone said so, but he was terrible at being a parent. Cold, distant, critical. Every interaction with him felt like walking through a minefield, never knowing which step would trigger an explosion. From my earliest memories, he made me feel like an intruder in my own home. "You have her eyes," he'd say sometimes, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Those damn eyes." He'd say it like an accusation, like having my mother's eyes was something I'd done deliberately to hurt him. Other times, he'd just stare at me across the dinner table with undisguised contempt. "I don't know why I bother," he'd mutter under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "It's not like you're ever going to amount to anything." I spent my childhood trying to earn his approval, his love, even just his acknowledgement. I got straight A's, staying up late with a flashlight under my covers to finish homework because I was terrified of bringing home anything less than perfect. I did all the household chores without being asked, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, doing laundry, cooking dinner by the time I was 9 years old. I stayed quiet, stayed small, tried to take up as little space as possible, eating my meals quickly, so I could disappear to my room before he found something to criticize. I thought that if I could just be perfect enough, good enough, invisible enough, maybe he would finally see me as worthy of being his daughter. Maybe he would look at me one day and smile. Maybe he would tell me he was proud of me. Maybe he would love me the way I saw other fathers love their daughters, with hugs and encouragement and the simple, unconditional acceptance that I craved more than anything. It never worked. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how perfect I was, it was never enough. There was always something wrong. My grades weren't high enough, the house wasn't clean enough, I talked too much or too little, or about the wrong things. I learned to read his moods the way sailors read the weather, always watching for storm clouds, always preparing for the next explosion. As I got older, the comments became sharper, crueler. "You're just like your mother," he'd sneer when I did something he didn't like. "Selfish. Careless. Only thinking about yourself." He'd slam doors, throw things, disappear for days on drinking benders. When he came back, he'd act like nothing had happened, and I'd learned that asking questions only made things worse. My teachers noticed. Of course they did. In a town like Millbrook, teachers notice everything. Mrs. Carmichael, my 5th grade teacher, once asked me gently if everything was okay at home. I told her everything was fine. What else could I say? Richard Harper had never hit me. He just made me feel, Every single day, like I was a mistake that he couldn't wait to correct. The one thing that saved me was school. I discovered early that I had a talent for science, biology in particular. There was something comforting about the orderliness of cells and organisms, the way everything had a place and a purpose. In biology, there were rules. There were explanations. Things made sense in a way my home life never did. By high school, I knew I wanted to study genetics. I was fascinated by the idea that everything we are, our hair color, our eye color, our predisposition to diseases, our talents, and our vulnerabilities, is written in a code so small we can't even see it. I devoured every book I could find on the subject, spending hours in the school library reading about DNA sequencing and gene therapy and the ethical debates surrounding genetic modification. I spent hours watching documentaries about DNA and heredity and the Human Genome Project, taking notes in a worn journal that became my most prized possession. I dreamed of becoming a researcher, of spending my life unlocking the secrets hidden in our cells, of maybe, just maybe, discovering something that could help people. I started entering science fairs and competitions, quietly, without telling my father. I won third place at the regional level my junior year, and first place my senior year for a project on hereditary markers for certain cancers. The judges told me I had a natural talent, that my research methodology was remarkable for someone your age. I hid my trophies in my closet because I knew my father would find a way to diminish them. My father thought my dreams were ridiculous. College, he laughed when I told him I wanted to apply. What makes you think you're college material? You're going to end up working at the diner like everyone else from this town. Don't get ideas above your station. I applied anyway. I applied to 12 schools, wrote my essays in secret at the public library, submitted my applications using the computer in my school's career center. I didn't tell my father about any of it. I didn't want to give him the chance to sabotage my dreams the way he'd sabotaged my self-worth. When the acceptance letters came, including one from Cornell University, one of the best biology programs in the country, I hid them in my locker at school. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote dozens of supplemental essays, and somehow, miraculously, pieced together enough financial aid to make it work. I told my father 2 weeks before graduation. His reaction was exactly what I expected: rage, followed by contempt, followed by a cold dismissal that hurt more than any shouting ever could. "Go, then," he said, turning away from me. "See if I care. You've never been anything but a burden anyway. At least now I won't have to look at your face every day." I left for Cornell that fall with 2 suitcases and a heart full of equal parts hope and devastation. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. College was everything I dreamed of and more. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence, who encouraged curiosity, who didn't make me feel like a burden for existing. The campus was beautiful. Old stone buildings covered in ivy, sprawling lawns where students gathered to study and debate, libraries that seemed to contain every book ever written. I threw myself into my studies with the same desperate intensity I'd shown in high school, but now it came from joy rather than survival. I was learning because I wanted to, not because I was terrified of the consequences of failure. I made friends, real friends, who liked me for who I was rather than who I was pretending to be. There was Sophia, a chemistry major from California, who had a laugh that could fill any room. There was Marcus, a pre-med student who spent his weekends volunteering at free clinics. There was Emma, a quiet girl from Maine who shared my love of genetics and became my study partner, my confidant, my sister in everything but blood. I joined study groups and research clubs and found a community of people who share my fascination with the mysteries of life at the molecular level. For the first time, I understood what it felt like to belong somewhere, to be accepted, to be seen. I called my father once a month, dutifully, out of some lingering sense of obligation. The conversations were always the same. Awkward silences punctuated by his grunts of acknowledgement and my desperate attempts to fill the void with updates about classes and weather and anything that might spark a real conversation. They never did. Eventually, the calls became every other month, then quarterly, then only on holidays. He never seemed to notice the difference. And then, in my sophomore year, I took a class that changed everything. The class was advanced genetics, taught by a professor named Dr. William Ashford. He was in his late 50s, with silver hair, kind eyes, and a reputation for being one of the most brilliant geneticists in the country. He'd published groundbreaking research on hereditary diseases, consulted for major pharmaceutical companies, and turned down offers from Harvard and Stanford to stay at Cornell because he loved the students. From the first lecture, I was captivated. Dr. Ashford had a way of explaining complex concepts that made them feel accessible, exciting, alive. He talked about DNA like it was poetry, like every strand contained stories waiting to be told. He made me believe that the work we were learning to do actually mattered, that it could help people, save lives, change the world. I worked harder in that class than I'd ever worked before. I stayed after lectures to ask questions. I attended every office hour. I read every paper he recommended and then came back to discuss them. I was determined to impress him, to prove that I belonged in his orbit. And I did. By the end of the semester, Dr. Ashford invited me to join his research lab. It was an incredible honor. He only took 2 or 3 undergraduates each year, and competition was fierce. I said yes without hesitation. Working in his lab was like finding a home I didn't know I'd been looking for. Dr. Ashford treated me with a respect I'd never experienced from an adult, especially not from a father figure. He challenged me, pushed me, expected excellence, but he also encouraged me, supported me, made me feel like I was capable of achieving anything I set my mind to. When I made mistakes, he helped me learn from them rather than using them as ammunition against me. When I succeeded, he celebrated genuinely, not with grudging acknowledgement, but with real pride. "You have a gift, Melody," he told me once after I'd presented a particularly successful experiment to the lab. We were standing in his office, the late afternoon light streaming through the windows, and he was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite identify. "A natural instinct for this work. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not good enough." I almost cried. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. No one had ever looked at me like I was something valuable, something worth investing in, something that mattered. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "That means more than you know." He nodded, and again I caught that strange look in his eyes, that flicker of something deeper that disappeared before I could examine it. "I mean it. You remind me of..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Never mind. Just know that I believe in you." I wanted to ask who I reminded him of. I wanted to ask about the sadness I sometimes saw in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. But I didn't. I was too afraid of overstepping, of ruining the one relationship in my life that felt truly supportive. Over the next 3 years, Dr. Ashford became more than just a mentor. He became a father figure, though I never would have said that out loud. He noticed when I was struggling and offered support. He celebrated my successes and helped me learn from my failures. He wrote recommendation letters that opened doors I never could have opened on my own. Sometimes, though, I caught him looking at me strangely. A lingering glance that lasted a beat too long. A flash of something in his eyes. Sadness? Recognition. That disappeared as quickly as it came. I never asked about it. I assumed it was just my imagination, or maybe that I reminded him of a former student, or a daughter of his own. I didn't know how right I was. My senior year arrived faster than I could believe. 4 years of hard work, late nights, and relentless determination had paid off. I was graduating summa cum laude with a degree in molecular biology. I'd been accepted to a prestigious PhD program at MIT. I had job offers and research opportunities and a future brighter than anything I'd ever dared to dream. I invited my father to the graduation ceremony. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still hoped, after 22 years of rejection, that he would finally see me as worthy of his pride. Maybe I thought that if he could witness this achievement, this moment of triumph, something in him would soften. Maybe I just wanted him to see that I had amounted to something, despite everything he'd said. He came. I was shocked when he actually showed up, sitting in the back row of the auditorium in the same worn flannel shirt he'd worn to my high school graduation. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, more tired, more beaten down by life. But he was there. The ceremony was beautiful. The dean gave a speech about achievement and potential. My classmates walked across the stage one by one, collecting their diplomas to thunderous applause. When my name was called, Melody Harper, summa cum laude, with departmental honors in biology, I thought my heart would burst. I walked across that stage feeling, for the first time in my life, like I had actually done something worth celebrating. Like I had proven, to myself and to the world, that I was more than the burden my father had always told me I was. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the science building. Students mingled with their families, taking photos, eating cake, basking in the glow of accomplishment. I found my father standing awkwardly by the punch bowl, looking completely out of place among the well-dressed academics and proud families. "Dad," I said, approaching him cautiously. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." He grunted, not meeting my eyes. Traffic was terrible. I tried again. "Did you see my name in the program? They listed all my honors, and I saw." His voice was flat, dismissive. The same tone he'd used my entire life. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the adrenaline of the day, or the weight of 22 years of trying and failing to earn his approval. Maybe I just needed to hear him say something, anything, that acknowledged what I'd accomplished. "Are you proud of me?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "Even a little bit?" Richard Harper looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. It wasn't softening. It wasn't pride or love, or even grudging respect. It was something darker, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for years, finally boiling over. "Proud of you," he repeated, loud enough that several nearby families turned to look. "Why should I be proud of you?" My face flushed with embarrassment. "Dad, please."
No.
He stepped forward, his voice rising, attracting more attention. "You want to know the truth? You want to know why I could never love you, why I could never stand to look at your face?" I felt the blood drain from my cheeks. "What are you talking about? You're not even my real daughter," he spat, his voice echoing across the reception hall. By now, everyone had stopped talking. Everyone was staring. "Your mother, your precious, sainted mother, she had an affair. You're not mine. You never were. I raised someone else's bastard child for 22 years, and you have the audacity to ask if I'm proud." The world stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only stand there, frozen, as Richard Harper, the man I'd spent my entire life trying to please, told a room full of strangers that I was nothing but a mistake. "Dad." I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't work. "Don't call me that," he shouted. "I'm not your father. I never was. I should have gotten rid of you the moment I found out, but your mother begged me to keep you. Said it would ruin us both if the truth came out. So I kept the secret. I raised you. I put a roof over your head." He laughed bitterly. "And this is the thanks I get. This is." "That's enough." The voice came from behind me, calm, authoritative, and utterly unexpected. I turned to see Dr. William Ashford walking toward us, his expression unreadable. In his hand, he held a manila envelope. "Who the hell are you?" Richard demanded. "My name is Dr. William Ashford. I've been Melody's professor and mentor for the past 4 years." He stopped a few feet away, his eyes moving from Richard to me and back again. "And I think it's time the truth came out. All of it." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Dr. Ashford's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "You just told this entire room that Melody isn't your biological daughter. You're correct. She isn't." He turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd glimpsed before but never understood. It was tenderness. It was grief. It was 22 years of searching finally coming to an end. "She's mine." The room erupted in murmurs. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" I whispered. Dr. Ashford opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. "I've been looking for my daughter for 22 years. Her mother, your mother, Melody, and I were together before she married Richard. We were in love. We were going to get married. But then Diana discovered she was pregnant, and her parents." He paused, his voice catching. Her parents were very traditional, very religious. They didn't approve of me. They pressured her to end things, to marry someone more suitable, someone they could control. That's a lie, Richard snarled. Diana never. Diana was 3 months pregnant with my child when she married you, Dr. Ashford said quietly. She told me herself, the day before the wedding. She begged me to let her go, said it was the only way to protect our baby from the scandal. She promised me that she would find a way to tell the truth someday, that we would be reunited eventually. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never saw her again. And then, 3 years later, I heard she had died. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My mother, the woman I'd never known, the woman who existed only in photographs and fragments of stories, had been in love with this man, had been carrying his child, had been forced into a marriage with Richard Harper to hide the truth. I never stopped looking, Dr. Ashford continued. I hired private investigators. I searched records. But Diana had covered her tracks well, and Richard. He looked at my father, at Richard, with barely concealed contempt. Richard made sure no one knew the truth. This is insane, Richard said, but his voice had lost its venom. He looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble around him. You have no proof. Actually, I do. Dr. Ashford handed me the papers from the envelope. 6 months ago, I finally found Diana's medical records from when she gave birth. The attending physician made a note about the father, a note that was supposed to be confidential, but ended up in a file that was never properly sealed. It gave me enough information to order a DNA test. I looked down at the papers in my shaking hands. The first was a copy of my birth certificate, the original one, not the version Richard had always shown me. Under father, instead of Richard Harper's name, it said father unknown. The second was a letter from a genetic testing company, dated 3 months ago. It detailed the results of a paternity test comparing my DNA to Dr. William Ashford's. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. You're my daughter, Dr. Ashford said softly, his voice breaking. You've been my student for 4 years, and I didn't let myself believe, but when I saw your admission photo, when I read your essays, when I watched you work. He wiped his eyes. You have her face, Diana's face, and you have my mind, my curiosity, my love of genetics. He laughed through his tears. You chose to study the very field that allowed me to finally find you. It's like she was guiding us both. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. Everything I'd ever believed about myself, about my identity, my family, my worth, was shattering and reforming into something entirely new. This is ridiculous, Richard said, but his voice was hollow now. Defeated. You can't just. I can. And I have. Dr. Ashford turned to face him fully. You knew from the beginning. Diana told you the truth before you married her. You agreed to raise Melody as your own in exchange for Diana's family's money and connections. It was a transaction. A business deal. And you've spent 22 years punishing an innocent child for a choice her mother made to protect her. Richard's face went red, then white. I raised her. I fed her. I kept a roof over her head. You made her feel worthless, Dr. Ashford said coldly. You told her she was a burden. You crushed her spirit and her self-worth every single day. That's not raising a child. That's abuse. The reception had gone completely silent. Families were watching with wide eyes. My classmates were frozen in place. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Richard looked around at all the faces staring at him, judging him, and something in him finally broke. Fine, he spat. She's yours. Take her. I never wanted her anyway. He turned and stormed toward the exit, pushing past shocked onlookers. At the door, he paused and looked back at me one final time. I wasted 22 years of my life on you. Don't ever contact me again. And then he was gone. I stood there, trembling, holding papers that proved everything I'd ever known was a lie. The man who raised me wasn't my father. The mother I'd never known had loved someone else. My entire identity had just been rewritten in front of 300 witnesses. Melody. Dr. Ashford's voice was gentle, tentative. I know this is overwhelming. I know you need time to process. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I've been waiting for you for 22 years. I can wait a little longer for you to decide what you want this relationship to be. I looked up at him, this man who had been my mentor, my professor, my advocate, and saw him with new eyes. The silver hair that was the same shade mine would probably turn someday. The shape of his nose that matched the one I saw in the mirror every morning. The passion for genetics that I'd always thought was coincidence, but now understood was something deeper, something inherited, something that connected us across 22 years of separation. I don't understand, I managed to say. Why didn't you tell me sooner? When you realized who I might be? I wasn't certain, he said. And I didn't want to disrupt your life based on a suspicion. So I ordered the DNA test quietly, using a sample from a coffee cup you'd left in the lab. He looked slightly embarrassed. I know that sounds invasive, but I needed to know. And once I had the results, I planned to tell you privately after graduation. I never intended, he gestured at the chaos around us. I never intended for it to happen like this. But when he started saying those things to you, I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't watch him hurt you anymore. The tears I'd been holding back finally broke free. I was crying, sobbing, really, in front of everyone, but I didn't care anymore. 22 years of pain, of rejection, of believing I was fundamentally unlovable, all of it came pouring out. Dr. Ashford, my father, my real father, stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. It was the first time he'd ever hugged me, and it felt like coming home. I'm so sorry, he whispered against my hair. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry for everything you went through. But I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm never letting go. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions, revelations, and painful adjustments. I moved out of my tiny off-campus apartment and into a guest room at William's house. Temporarily, we both said, until I figured out what I wanted. But the truth was I needed to be near him. I needed to learn who he was, who I was, who we could be together. We spent hours talking, filling in the gaps of 22 years of separation. He showed me photo albums from his younger days, pictures of him at conferences in labs standing in front of universities around the world. And pictures of my mother. So many pictures of Diana. She was beautiful. I'd known that from the few photos Richard had reluctantly kept, but seeing her through William's eyes was different. In his pictures, she was alive, laughing, dancing, making silly faces at the camera. He'd captured her joy, her spirit, the woman she'd been before everything went wrong. She loved you so much, William told me one night as we sat on his back porch, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. Even before you were born, she talked about you constantly. What she'd teach you, how she'd raise you, the adventures you'd have together. She wanted to give you the world. Then why did she leave you? I asked. It was the question I'd been too afraid to ask, the one that had haunted me since graduation day. If she loved you, if she loved me, why did she marry him? William was quiet for a long moment. Fear, he finally said. Her parents had enormous power over her. They controlled her finances, her social connections, her entire sense of self-worth. They told her that if she didn't do what they wanted, they'd disown her, destroy my career, make sure our child grew up in poverty and shame. He shook his head. She was 23, pregnant, terrified. She made the choice she thought would protect you. It was wrong, but I understand why she made it. I learned the full story of my mother and Dr. Ashford, William, as I was slowly learning to call him. They'd met at a conference when she was 23 and he was 27. She was a research assistant. He was a rising star in the genetics world. They fell in love instantly, the kind of whirlwind romance that seems impossible until it happens to you. But Diana's parents, my grandparents, I realized with a jolt, were wealthy, conservative, and deeply concerned with appearances. They didn't approve of William Ashford, who came from a modest background and had no family connections to speak of. When Diana discovered she was pregnant, her parents gave her an ultimatum: marry someone respectable and keep the family name intact, or be cut off entirely. Diana was young, scared, and facing enormous pressure from every direction. She chose to marry Richard Harper, a man her parents had selected, a man who agreed to claim the child as his own in exchange for financial support for his struggling auto shop. She told herself it was the only way to protect her baby from scandal, the only way to give her child a stable home. She was wrong, but she never lived long enough to realize it. The car accident that killed her wasn't an accident at all. William had hired investigators years ago who'd uncovered evidence that the brakes on Diana's car had been tampered with. There was never enough proof to pursue charges, but the suspicion had haunted him for 2 decades. I always wondered if Richard had something to do with it, William told me one evening as we sat in his office, surrounded by research papers and family photos. Photos that now included me. Diana had started talking about leaving him, about telling the truth. She'd called me 2 days before she died, said she couldn't live with the lies anymore. And then, he couldn't finish the sentence. I didn't know what to think. Richard Harper was many things. Cruel, cold, emotionally abusive, but was he capable of murder? The question haunted me, but there were no easy answers. There probably never would be. What I did know was that I had a father now. A real father, who wanted me, who had always wanted me, who had spent 22 years searching for me. And I had a new identity to explore. Not just Melody Harper, the unwanted daughter, but Melody Ashford, the biological child of a man who had loved my mother deeply and had never stopped loving the daughter he'd never known. We took things slowly. We had dinner together, once a week, then twice. We talked about Diana. William shared memories I'd never had, photos I'd never seen, stories that made my mother come alive in a way she never had before. I learned that I had inherited her laugh, her stubbornness, her tendency to cry at sappy movies. I also learned that William had never married, never had other children. I couldn't, he admitted one night. It felt like a betrayal, like giving up on finding you. That broke my heart and healed it at the same time. 3 months after graduation, I legally changed my name. It was a small ceremony at the courthouse. Just me, William, and a few friends who'd become family over the past 4 years. Melody Diana Ashford, the judge announced as she signed the paperwork. Best of luck to you. I turned to William, my father, my real father, and saw tears streaming down his face. Diana would be so proud of you, he whispered. I'm so proud of you. For the first time in my life, those words didn't feel like something I had to earn. They just felt true. I started my PhD program at MIT that fall, moving to Cambridge with a mix of excitement and trepidation. It was everything I'd hoped for, challenging, stimulating, surrounded by brilliant minds working on problems that could change the world. My research focused on genetic markers for hereditary diseases, building on the work I'd done in William's lab. I threw myself into it with the same passion I'd always had, but now it came from a different place. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't running from rejection or chasing approval that would never come. I was just doing what I loved, with the support of a family I'd finally found. William visited once a month, making the drive from Ithaca to Cambridge despite my protests that it was too far. It's 4 hours, he'd say. I spent 22 years trying to find you. 4 hours is nothing. He'd take me to dinner, tour my lab, meet my new colleagues. He was proud of me in a way I could feel, not just hear, a warmth that radiated from him whenever he looked at me. For my part, I drove to Cornell for holidays and occasional weekends. I helped him pack up his office when he finally announced his retirement. 40 years in academia, he said, and now he wanted to spend his remaining years being a father rather than a professor. We went through old files together, and I found a folder labeled Diana/Melody that contained every piece of evidence he'd gathered over 22 years. Photos, records, private investigator reports, failed leads, and dead ends. Page after page of a father's desperate search for his stolen daughter. You never gave up, I said, tears streaming down my face as I flipped through the folder. How could I, he replied. You're my daughter. I would have searched for the rest of my life. William and I talk every day now. Sometimes it's just a quick text, a joke, a reminder that someone's thinking of you, a photo of something that made one of us think of the other. Sometimes it's hours-long phone calls where we share the details of our days, our hopes, our fears, our dreams. We're building the relationship we should have had all along, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Last month, I received a letter from Richard Harper. It was the first communication I'd had from him since graduation day. I almost threw it away unopened. But something, curiosity, maybe, or the need for closure, made me read it. "Melody," it began. "I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I need you to know something before I die." My hands started shaking. Before I die? The doctors found a tumor 6 months ago. It's spread too far to treat. They're giving me weeks, maybe a month if I'm lucky. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I don't deserve it. I'm telling you because I need to confess. I knew who your father was from the day Diana told me she was pregnant. I hated you for it. Every time I looked at you, I saw her betrayal, her weakness, her inability to love me the way I wanted to be loved. I took that hatred out on you for 22 years, and I know now that was wrong. You were an innocent child. You didn't deserve any of it. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. Nothing I say can undo what I did. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I became, and I'm ashamed. Diana's accident wasn't an accident. I tampered with the brakes. She was going to leave me, going to take you to him, and I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let him win. So I made sure she couldn't leave. I killed her. I killed the only woman I ever loved because I couldn't stand the thought of losing her. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just telling you the truth because you deserve to know. Because after 22 years of lies, you deserve at least that much. I'm sorry. Richard Harper. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called William. When he arrived at my apartment an hour later, I handed him the letter without a word. I watched his face as he read it, watched grief and rage and vindication and sorrow flash across his features in rapid succession. When he finished, he sat down heavily, like the weight of the words had crushed something inside him. "I knew it," he whispered. "I always knew it." But knowing and proving, he trailed off. "What do we do?" I asked. "We go to the police. We give them this letter. And we let the justice system do what it should have done 22 years ago." Richard Harper died 3 weeks later, before he could stand trial. Some people said he got away with it. I'm not sure I agree. He spent 22 years living with the knowledge of what he'd done, punishing me because he couldn't stand to face his own guilt. That's a kind of hell, even if it isn't the one I would have chosen for him. My mother's case was officially reopened and reclassified as a homicide. There was a small article in the Millbrook newspaper. Local man confesses to decades-old murder. And then life moved on, the way it always does. But not for me. For me, everything had changed. I visit my mother's grave now, when I'm back in New York. William comes with me sometimes. We stand there together, looking at the stone that marks the place where Diana Marie Harper is buried, and we talk to her. We tell her about my research, about William's upcoming retirement, about the life we're building together. We tell her we love her. We tell her we're okay. And I think somehow she knows. Last week, I presented my first major research paper at an international genetics conference. William was in the audience, beaming with pride. When I finished, the room erupted in applause, the kind of genuine, enthusiastic response that still surprises me, even after all these years. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was probably 19 or 20, with nervous eyes and a worn notebook clutched in her hands. "Dr. Ashford?" she said, using my legal name for the first time. "I just wanted to say, your story is incredible. What you've overcome, what you've accomplished, it gives me hope." I smiled at her. "What's your name?"
"Emma."
"I'm a freshman here. I want to study genetics, but my family thinks it's a waste of time. They want me to do something practical." She made air quotes around the word. "But when I heard you speak about how you found your calling and your family through this work..." She trailed off, embarrassed. I thought about all the years I'd spent feeling worthless. All the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough. All the doors that had seemed permanently closed until I found the strength to open them anyway. Emma, I said, the people who doubt you, even the ones who are supposed to love you, they don't define your future. You do. You define your future by the choices you make, the work you put in, the dreams you refuse to give up on. I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card. Here's my email. If you ever need advice or encouragement, or just someone to tell you that you're on the right path, reach out. I'm here. She took the card with trembling hands. Thank you. Thank you so much. I watched her walk away, and I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who stood in cap and gown, hoping her father would finally be proud of her. That girl is gone now. In her place is a woman who knows her worth, not because someone finally told her, but because she discovered it for herself. My father, Richard Harper, told me I wasn't his real daughter. He said it to hurt me, to destroy me, to take away the one moment of triumph I'd earned. Instead, he gave me the truth. He gave me William. He gave me a new identity, a new family, a new understanding of who I am and where I came from. And in the end, that's the best gift he ever gave me. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to know how many people have discovered that the family you choose is more powerful than the family you're born into. And remember, your worth isn't determined by the people who fail to see it. It's determined by the life you build, the love you give, and the truth you finally have the courage to embrace. My name is Melody Diana Ashford. I am the daughter of William Ashford and Diana Harper. I am a geneticist, a researcher, a woman who turned pain into purpose. And this is my truth. Closing lines. Your worth isn't determined by the people who fail to see it. It's determined by the life you build, the love you give, and the truth you finally have the courage to embrace. My name is Melody Diana Ashford. I am the daughter of William Ashford and Diana Harper. I am a geneticist, a researcher, a woman who turned pain into purpose. And this is my truth.